Hey, good evening, everyone. It's CJ. I want to welcome everyone to not only a multi-platform live stream, but also streaming this across a couple of different media outlets. So I want to welcome all those tuning in, not only from Rogue News, but also people that are tuning in from the Gadfly Multi-Channel Network. This is one of those conversations and the times that we're in. I felt the utmost importance to try to reach as large as an audience as possible. So I'm very excited about tonight to be joined by Alex Hills. Alex is the founder of Candles4Assange, which is obviously Julian Assange. Now, she's also a former university sustainable architecture lecturer, and she also runs her own architectural business. And at the same time, keeping up with all the global protests, everything that's listed under the activities for Candles4Assange. She's based out of New Zealand. I'm very excited to have her here tonight. So, Alex, welcome to the Rogue News platform.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on today. So thank you. We need to get the word out. So
well, it's my honor to have you on. It's an extreme pleasure. And before I forget, I do want to real quick also send a huge thank you to Sherry Clayton, who is one of our Rogue News listeners, who was, very steadfast and say, hey, CJ, because we here at Rogue, we've covered Julian for several years now. We've talked about his case, everything that's transpired. And ultimately, I think we're probably in the 11th hour, the critical point now, and very timely. It's crazy to think how we've kind of came full circle from everything from the WikiLeaks to the DNC servers. Alex, why don't you go ahead and start and tell a little bit more about yourself? Tell a little bit more about yourself to our audience, please.
Yeah, sure. Well, I did come into sort of political activism online originally because I supported Bernie, and I wouldn't at all now. I'm in a new position completely, but this is where I got started. And I think New Zealand suffered, and Australia suffered from an early guinea pig stage of censorship that no American was experiencing. Just in a way to try and test it out with a New Zealand audience. And I was very aware back in those days that there was crucifying algorithm censorship and shadow banning. And most of my American campaign friends thought I was, being crazy, but I think that they were testing it out on us. Obviously, the WikiLeaks came up there, and I've always been an anti-war supporter. I play violin at a lot of TPP, anti-trade agreement, anti-war events here, and I had done that for a number of years. And then I saw Alex Taylor in the UK getting dragged off the street playing. He's an Australian in Britain, and he plays the violin, and he was using it to give a rendition of the Australian anthem and Waltzing Matilda outside of the embassy back 2018, I think it was, in January. And I saw this, and he got pulled off the road by the armed task force, his violin confiscated. And of course, as a result, it got onto mainstream media. And I thought, gosh, I can play the violin. I can make a spectacle of myself. Maybe I can do something. Also, at the same time, Elizabeth Lee Voss from Consulting News was calling out for people who were Assange activists to use whatever talent they had, whatever they may be, and put them to work to get the truth out. And so very shortly afterwards, Susie Dawson and Elizabeth Lee Voss started Unity4J. I saw that there were these global protests, and I was part of that group. And yet New Zealand wasn't hosting anything. I couldn't find a single support group for WikiLeaks in New Zealand that were active. And I thought, crikey, this global event that I'm trying to help promote online has got no one in New Zealand. We have to do something about that. And so back in, I think it was June 2018 is when I did my first protest on the streets of Wellington. And very soon after, I connected with Auckland people, and we got them doing them. And I had been working on sort of promoting global protests that were going on the same day in up to 20, 30 cities at the time. And I thought this was the future. If we're going to make a stand, we've got to educate the public on the streets, because the algorithm is truly crushing us online. And that's where I started to get known, I guess, by the WikiLeaks activists community. And I guess people trusted me. I think it's easy to trust someone who uses things like candles for protests and music. It's very peaceful, and it's very difficult to come in and you know, co-opt it like we've seen with so many of the other genuine movements that have turned into a nightmare.
No,
So that's really the history. So.
Yeah, well, I really applaud your efforts and everything that you do in terms of activism and anti-war. Really kind of follow the same suit, but obviously you've taken your music talents and I completely agree with you. Like, how more can you not a subtle message in terms of influencing people, leveraging music, and then talking about like some of the events that are unfolding. How did you get connected with Julian Assange and his family and the Free Assange movement?
Well, there was a really lovely event in February last year with Politics in the Pub in Sydney. And originally myself and Timothy Wagner, who do a lot of, we did the Julian Assange song initially, we really wanted to try and get out there. So we did a few fundraising gigs, and we only actually raised enough money for me to go. So I went on my own for one day to go and play at the pub on live stream, and I think Consortium News streamed it out, and a bunch of people did. And I played Waltzing Matilda in lieu of Alex Taylor, who'd been removed doing such. And Christine saw this video, and I mean, I was in tears when I saw this tweet, but she had got it onto a USB stick and delivered it to someone in London who was going to take it to the embassy. And I genuinely think it might have been one of the last things he saw before being carted off in April, because at the time, if you remember, he'd been disconnected from any kind of internet communication, gagged for a year or more by that time. And so I got this wonderful message from Christine, and the video apparently went to Julian. I don't know if that's true, but I'm told so. And then not long afterwards, we had World Press Freedom Day, and unbelievably, the UK High Commissioner was hosting a breakfast event at Parliament, and myself and the other founding member of Free Assange New Zealand, we got in there. We sat through the majority of it. It was clear they weren't going to ask any questions. And it was in front of an MP and a couple of media personalities and an academic and the British High Commissioner. The Canadian High Commissioner was in the audience. Not a word was mentioned of Julian Assange in their World Press Freedom Breakfast. So I stood up, and my colleague filmed me, and I gave a rogue speech, very, very quickly delivered there. And that got in World Socialist website, and it got all over the place. It got translated in 3 languages, and yeah, so that the word of that got out, particularly as WikiLeaks editor retweeted and really ripped a hole into what they said, which was that the Luke Harding, who is actually responsible for probably for Julian's problems right now, and and actually published the password to all the classified documents in his book. They said that he believed that Julian wasn't a journalist, which I find extraordinary, and the WikiLeaks editor retweeted that. And then probably only a month later, we did Julian Assange's birthday, and that's where Candles4Assange started. The year before, we'd done Free Assange candles at the Wellington Parliament, but we decided we would do that at the US, embassy instead. And that really was the birth of Candles4Assange, but it wasn't till the next birthday. That was when we started the New Zealand petition for his asylum, just to try and get the politicians to actually acknowledge the problem and take a side. And yeah, so the following year we did a Candles4Assange in Wellington, called out to the world and said, please join us for a birthday protest for Assange, a candle vigil or music or whatever you want to do. And 62 cities joined us. And that's when Julian's dad contacted me. So that's the pathway to having been able to, I guess, be trusted as an activist that's genuine. Which is hard, obviously, because there's so many co-opters in there, and people that would like to see us fail. But yeah, that's really how it all happened.
That's an amazing story, and to tell it in that manner, to hear it firsthand, and you're right, I do. So I have your page brought up right now, the Candles4Assange, and I do follow on Twitter as well, Christine Assange, who is Julian's mom, and there have been times that literally I've been moved to tears in terms of what she shares, what she posts in regards to, and I know like the timeliness of our discussion today probably like, as we're documenting history, I truly feel that it's probably one of the most important conversations, discussions, perhaps of maybe my lifetime, just in regards to what's happening right now, where the same alphabet agencies who Julian exposed, dating back to some of his, the early work with WikiLeaks. And I mostly people, I think everyone's probably heard of WikiLeaks in terms of, him being the founder of WikiLeaks, and as much exposure as they did. It started with the video, The Collateral Murder. I'm not going to show the video, just in part just because the censoring. I'm sure that the YouTube, wherever, would probably kind of shut it down right away. But again, eyewitness testimony in regards to the journalists that were killed during this Iraq situation that happened. And I can't remember the news media agency where they were from. I think it was Reuters, where there were two
Yeah.
Reuters journalists that were killed during this attack. So then fast forward to a few years later, where Chelsea Manning and potentially maybe even Seth Rich really provided, again, we can't factually state that, but in regards to the DNC leaks. And just to think how that information, for the most part, really exposed quite a bit in regards to the DNC, really kind of helped Donald J. Trump in terms of, 2016 establishing himself as a president. And so it's very crazy during this time period that some of those same alphabet agencies who are specifically targeting Julian Assange are now about to attempt to really undermine an entire election here in the US. So that's why I state that this is just such an important conversation as it relates to Julian. And then more importantly, in regards to what's happening with him right now in the UK. Why don't you bring us up to speed and talk a little bit around the current situation of what's happening with Julian?
Well, I mean, the latest news is that 49 out of a block of 70 that Julian is in Belmarsh prison have COVID. And that being so statistically improbable does really point to the fact that they are trying to harm him. And we know that Julian Assange has got a lung condition, which is deeply distressing. With regards to the DNC information that was released that showed election fraud the last time, I mean, this really pointed to how bad it had got. And perhaps the last election was cheated. Certainly the primaries were, we know that. But you do wonder whether the popular vote came in for Hillary only because of perhaps cheating that they underestimated, and they sorted it out by the next election. But I will say that, I mean, equally, Biden calls Julian Assange a high-tech terrorist, but equally, Trump's been on record saying that he believes the death penalty is appropriate for whistleblowers like WikiLeaks. And he has clearly been the one that made the order for the 4.2 billion IMF loan, which was transferred to Ecuador in return for allowing him to basically to ignore international law and have Assange arrested from asylum, which is never happened before, as far as I'm aware, and that's what I'm told. So, and when it comes to the DNC leaks, I think we can say we've not that Seth was the leaker, because sources are protected, but we can say with certainty that William Binney has debunked any kind of idea that the data came from anywhere other than within the DNC, mainly because of the download times shown as the files were laid down on that USB stick or whatever it was that was taken out of the DNC. And I think that has been proven, and the fact that Lucifer 2 was a smokescreen for, the Russian interference narrative. And as we know from the Mueller report and from the findings that came out, 2 days before the election, WikiLeaks have been completely cleared of any kind of Russian involvement. There was never any. And so really, it points to what's going on now. I really do believe that Julian Assange was silenced for a number of reasons. And what's rolling out around the world in terms of the Great Reset and the lockdowns and what's going on right now, I think he was silenced because he would have spoken up about it. In fact, in his last known appearance, he spoke of nano dust. He was concerned about the technocratic takeover, and that was some of the last words he said. It does make you wonder now, while the world's gone so crazy in the last few months, and Julian Assange has not been able to speak out. And I feel if he was, the mainstream media would have a lot more handle on the truth. At the moment, they've diverged completely from what's going on in alt media. I'm completely shocked by just how much people have had the wool pulled over their eyes.
Yeah, very well said. And I couldn't agree more with you that in this time of day and age that we're in, where truth is the enemy of the state, they couldn't afford to have an organization like WikiLeaks out there and providing a platform for whistleblowers to expose these things. So therefore, when they were able to really, for the most part, shut WikiLeaks down, although they're still operational, but in part, you know, with Julian and the Dropbox that was created, it really, and then also just in terms of seeing what happened to whistleblowers. Look at Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, where it ended up them, where we're supposed to have whistleblower protection rights in the United States that we truly don't. And it's just very unfortunate that the William Barr and the current DOJ, that they are in fact that are ones that are really heading the stream in terms of the prosecution of Julian, really trying to push for extradition. And in fact, it doesn't even really look like extradition right now. It looks like they're trying to just drag out to the process, hoping that Julian will pass away in jail, which is just the ultimate, if you ask me, crime against, you know, humanity and the treatment of him. What's happening. Let's shift a little bit. Let's talk about why this case with Julian is just so important as it relates to journalism. And you see a lot of journalists coming out that are just expressing so much concern. This is the first time in history that a journalist has ever any attempt to convict them. And I can't remember what the actual process is, but why don't you share a little bit around why this case is just so important for journalism?
Well, it's not just about one man. You know, it's just the chilling effect on journalism and whistleblowing that this effect is having when someone like Julian Assange can be taken down with all that support, millions of people that believe he's a hero, and yet they can still take him down. It's very concerning that, I mean, we've got Tulsi Gabbard, haven't we, trying to suggest some whistleblowing laws coming through. I mean, I think given that Britain is now looking like a major culprit behind Russiagate and behind the Syria war lies and behind the military complex and behind the Democrats, really, it does make you wonder. It does make wonder why all this is going on, and whether the British are the ones actually causing the problem. But I mean, I will go back to what Cassandra Fairbanks revealed about where the orders came from, and as far as we can see, these are from Trump direct, and people like Pompeo still in his, you know, it still proves that people like Pompeo just speaks volumes. So we're in trouble whether it's Biden calling him a high-tech terrorist and taking down the world, or whether we've got, you know, I'm concerned that neither side is really, you know, pushing for him. And the Q narrative has made everyone sit back and go, oh yeah, trust the plan because we believe everyone's doing the right thing. But are they? I think I'm wondering whether both parties are in on this, you know, or at least a good proportion of the Republicans that make it impossible for any good to happen. But of course, the chilling effect on journalism is shocking. And the other thing is protecting journalist sources. As you know, he's down for 17 charges of espionage, and one of, they're trying to kind of link into hacking. Now, the original claim was that he helped Chelsea Manning crack a password to get her into the system. But that is not true, because Chelsea Manning already had access to the system. And the only thing that was done was an anonymous user, which, by the way, they haven't actually proven is Julian Assange in the court.
They haven't, not one bit.
No. And yet all that person was doing, the Anon who was talking to Chelsea Manning, was trying to protect her identity when she went back in to take the information. So it's a fallacy to say that he helped hack in any way. And it is true that back when he was a kid, he had a hacking conviction in I think he tried to hack into the Pentagon or something. But, you know, also he helped the Australian police catch a whole bunch of pedophiles as part of that. So, you know, you know, the jury's out on whether both sides or one side is better than the other on this. It's hard to tell.
I'd really like to, even personalize this a little bit because, on her page, Christine Assange, especially on Twitter, and a lot of times we don't get to know the person and their connection, their family and everything. And I'm confident she's probably shared some story with you. So why don't we personalize this a little bit and talk in regards to Julian Assange, the human, about his family and the number of years that he's been kept from the children and everything else like that. Could you please share with our listeners? I think that's an important portion of this discussion.
Yeah, well, he has a beautiful family. He has an older child in Australia, but also he's got two beautiful little boys who are based in London, I understand, with Stella Morris, who started off her relationship with Julian as the lawyer who could speak Swedish, is Oxford lawyer, very, very talented and human rights. And so she was on the case. And she had spent so much time in the embassy with him that they fell in love. And this was kept a secret as much as possible because they were trying to protect Stella from potential persecution. Obviously, that was on the cards. Given what we know about the spying that went on in the embassy, which all the journalists that came to visit him have documented and proven, and there's that Spanish case at the moment going on, where they actually tried to steal the baby's nappy to get the DNA to try and prove who the mother was, because he was coming in with a gay pretend father and visiting Julian in the embassy, the little boy, and is it Gabriel, I think, and so, yeah, so they were hiding it as much as possible. What happened is during the court proceedings, it became clear that Vanessa Barreza wanted to reveal their identity to the world, and all the attempts to stop that from happening failed, and so therefore they tried to hit it first by getting a positive story out. WikiLeaks got a positive story out about the family first, and I understand that John Shipton, who is an architect and a former anti-war activist himself, his father's spoken out an awful lot and has got quite a public persona, particularly in the last year or so, speaking out for Julian, whereas Christine has tried to, stay a little bit sheltered away from, because she's been attacked for so long, given that she's been on the case, on the case for a long time, at least online. And she will only really do interviews with people she trusts, like Susie Dawson or Unity 4J people that she works with, like Kathy Vaughan, people who she knows are not going to sell her out. And so it's been very difficult for her. She won't do interviews, and she's very hurt and destroyed by this whole I imagine some persecutions happened to her. I don't know the details, but yeah, John has been speaking out quite bravely around Europe, and he's been back in Australia doing work with the Parliament there. There is a working group trying to introduce bills and movements
right.
in the Australian Parliament, but the Australians are doing nothing, of course. They're just stringing him out to dry.
And I think that's the toughest thing for me to swallow, is in regards to the inhumane treatment of a human being and everything that Julian has had to endure. And can you imagine being a mother, being a mom or a dad, and to witness this taking place with your son, who all he did was basically just expose, war crimes that were committed, share, information that was vital, that really kind of transformed things. And then to think about the children that are involved, that, hey, we don't want these kids to grow up fatherless and everything that's transpired. So that human connection to me is just one of the things that I think is just so important. So it's very unfortunate. And I would label Julian an actual patriot. I think what he has done, I think he should receive a Nobel Peace Prize. And I think he did already.
He's been nominated, I think they say 6 times, but I can only find 5 on record, 4 on record, I think. But
yeah, and I think WikiLeaks and all their reporting has never had to retract anything at all that they have.
So no, 14 years now, not a single retraction. So you can't say that for any other media organization whatsoever. And I think, speaking to the mother saying what's happening to her child, I think that's why so many of us Assange activists are brave mothers speaking out. I am. I've got 2, and it does horrify me that they're not going to be able to, hold their governments to account in the future, or hope for an election where their vote is accounted. Yeah, and I think that's why so many women have done it. But also, there's been another nefarious pushback, which is the kind of pink pussy hat, Me Too kind of destroying men who tried to fight for Julian, and then ending up calling them rape sympathizers, and somehow, or even contriving to do the same thing they did to Julian in Sweden and set them up. And try to make them look like they're some kind of sexual predator. So men have been scared off supporting Assange. In fact, they were making a move to try and do at least half women speaking out at these events, so that there's a little bit of balance shown. And so many of us are women, and I think it is the ones who've got children and actually realize just how horrifying this is going to be for them.
Right. Alex, how familiar are you with the actual case in terms of, it seems like every step of the way they attempted to silence Julian, remove him from the court hearings. I think that they really limited the number of witnesses that were willing to participate. It seems like every bit of obstacle that they'd already pretty much convicted him even prior to the beginning of it. So talk a little bit around the case, if you would, please, and just the unjust with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, they have disallowed some witness statements. They would refuse to allow a torture victim to speak himself. They only allowed his written testimony in. They restricted all testimonies to 30 minutes, which often cause problems, because then, there would be delaying tactics going on, and people trying to catch them up all the way. There were technical problems. The Amnesty and other human rights and journalist groups were denied access to the court. They made sure that even people like Craig Murray, who've done a fine job on reporting the trial, weren't even allowed to bring a pencil in to the court. And they're not that they were in the court; they were in a sort of fake, Zoom court. And often there was technical difficulties, which meant so and so couldn't be heard, or this had to be delayed, or. And I know Nicky Hager spoke at a lecture. He's a New Zealand investigative journalist who worked for WikiLeaks and was part of the team that redacted the names. Personally, that 10,000 names redacted, I believe. And that was done by a bunch of journalists, one of them being New Zealand's Nicky Hager. And he said that the defence were trying to catch him up on everything, every little niggly statement or word that they were trying to twist it to push this narrative. And then when you look at the actual case, Article 4 in British law says that you cannot extradite someone for political purposes. At the same time, the Queen, when pressed on this issue, said she cannot comment because it's political. So, that double whammy is completely been ignored by the court. And then you get into all the process issues. I mean, there's literally death by process that's going on here. And why they didn't appeal the case on the basis of the COVID thing, at least, to take him and put him in house arrest or something, is incredible, particularly as there were moves to release non-violent offenders from prison for that purpose. And now it looks like they're just, thrusting anyone with COVID in the British prison system into Julian's block.
Right. That's insane. That's absolutely crazy. Who in their right mind? I mean, even here in the United States, they're letting people out of prison because of COVID. And here you have not even, you can't even really say an offender, because we're still at this point really even trying to figure out what the crime is, right?
And he lost a Brazilian friend from suicide in the block, only a couple of weeks ago. And if you look at all the process stuff, the spying on the case, the fact that he wasn't allowed legal documentation, the fact that he was strip searched and moved from cell to cell to cell overnight, so he got no sleep before the trial, that he was put in a hot box for a number of hours before going into the trial and into the court. And this is when he used to be able to appear in his glass bulletproof box, which they didn't even do for Pinochet, or it's extraordinary. Britain 2020, as John Pill just says, it's just a joke. It is a joke.
Have any of the humanitarian organizations, I'm sure that there have been a few who have gotten involved and tried to intervene, petitions and all those things. I mean, it's again, I said this at the beginning of our conversation, it's just absolutely crazy that the same alphabet agency that Julian worked to expose just recently just basically tried to undermine an entire election here in the United States, and something on previous broadcasts that I've had the last few mornings on Rogue News in the morning. We've had a significant amount of new people subscribing to our platform. Is really to go to Twitter and to the social handles and at POTUS, tweet directly to at POTUS to free Assange. There's no reason at this point where he shouldn't just go ahead and say, you know what, I'm gonna pardon Julian, and we're gonna have some conversations, and he could help to expose these things that are occurring. I think it would just be very timely at this point to really do that and make a direct action. And if we get enough people, including those that are tuning in, people ask, well, what can I directly do? Besides going to, and we're going to go over the different sites where people can help support your efforts. But that's one thing that could be real key, is to take to social media and really advocate and let the voices be heard times 1,000, times 10,000, times 100,000. And when that becomes viral, which it has before in terms of activism and freeing Assange, it's critical at this time period that literally what he's experiencing right now is a form of organized torture, Alex.
Well, I mean, they've demonetized and shadow banned and algorithms us out more than ever of the last. I mean, obviously, if you're in any kind of right of center or non-partisan or anti-war or Julian Assange, free Julian Assange, or pro-Palestine issue, you are immediately deleted from any kind of discourse that anyone other than preaching to the converted. So you've still got an illusion that you're kind of getting the word out on social media, but to the large part, as soon as you become identified as an Assange activist, or you put the word Assange in your tweet, it's already limited. And that's happening not just to our topic, it's happening to obviously a lot. Now, you spoke about NGOs and what did they do? What did the non-governmental organizations or human rights group? Well, Amnesty resisted doing anything other than speaking out about Chelsea Manning, who came to Australia and was banned, and then New Zealand had to live stream her voice over to Australia because she wasn't allowed in the country. With all that censorship going on, it's
difficult to get anything accomplished, right?
Nuts,
to get the word out.
We've been trying to get Amnesty Australia, Amnesty to recognise this all along, and they didn't. And in fact, we know that Amnesty have written bogus reports for the Syria war, and we know that basically NGOs around the world, although have really good people in them, like the FBI, I'm sure, and the CIA, but like for the large part are corrupted by the same military-industrial complex. I think, some people are calling it the Mickey Mat, aren't they? The military, industrial, congressional, media, academia, think tank.
Basically, absolutely.
Yeah, and so this is what we're facing. Now, Amnesty International came out 2 days before the extradition trial in February. We had a protest in 24 cities planned, and I had a little side protest going called Shamnesty.
Okay, I like it.
So I kind of adopted the logo for Candles for Assange, because it's a candle with barbed wire. So I thought that was perfect, for Candles for Assange. We stole it for a while. I really pissed off Amnesty over the times, and I was disgusted when they waited to 2 days before the trial, when the noise about it was quite loud in the mainstream media, and of course they could get a lot of profits from their subs that would happen because they were supporting Julian Assange. But did they do anything up to that point? Have they really done much? No.
Yeah.
I do understand that there's a number of journalist organizations that are speaking out, free press organizations, human rights organizations, but they are few and far between because most people are too scared to speak out against the government. It's just like they've rolled over and given up. But when it comes to actually doing stuff, I think sometimes old tech is better, like faxing people.
There you go. Absolutely.
Sending letters. Physical letters are harder to ignore, and they're harder to, any kind of group letter that's a repeated information going to the same old people, they tend to just get mass ignored. Or anyone that, if you sent an email and you copied it to 25 people, those tend to go to spam. So we're not getting through with the old, and also, of course, where you're able and if it's appropriate, boots on the ground or online protests, getting local people, government people into a Zoom meeting and talking to them publicly, like trying to actually engage, even if you're not allowed and you're locked down. I think there are methods to ring up people and chat. And of course, just talk to everyone you know. about this issue and explain just how pressing the issues are.
I completely agree. And, you have to throw everything at it. And I know that, again, that just Christine and how much effort she puts it into it. And then also what you're doing. Is there anything, Alex, that I missed that you'd want to share that you wanted to discuss before we jump into how people can get involved and what else can they do to help free Julian? So go for it. Is there anything?
Yeah, we are calling out now for protests. We're, saying whether they're online or on the street, we're not trying to push anyone to break any laws, but I really think the time is now. And the crackdown on everyone, on doctors and scientists right now is quite frightening. They're pretending that they're science-based when they're just disallowing any kind of argument about science, which is non-scientific in basis. And the crackdown that's happening right now, there's never been a more important time. And I think people like Jason Bermas are calling out for a great resistance, and he wants to do that on the 10th of December. And we had also called out for a Human Rights Day action for Julian Assange. And we've got, so far, I think we've got Denver doing a couple of events that week. We've got Wellington, Auckland, Mexico City, and London, and Vienna. And so we got, a number of cities already signed up for the 10th of December. And then the January 4 is the extradition decision day. And I know it's really short after New Year's Eve and everything, but from the 2nd onwards for that whole week, and particularly on that Monday where the decision might be actually heard, we're trying to encourage as many protests, be they online, virtual, street action, stalls, music, gigs, anything. Wear Julian Assange t-shirts, just get the word out that week as much as possible. Print pamphlets, there's lots of resources available. Somerset Bean has got graphics. Candles4Assange on Twitter will help you if you need to promote it, because all the groups around the world, all those banned activists, they all promote within their own circles. So we all, cross promotion happens. And I think of Candles4Assange now more than a birthday event for Julian once a year. It's more like a kind of protest listing and online protest listing service.
Yeah, I mean, just there's some great content there. I'm showing a video right now of Julian's kids right now on there. And again, just to think that, hey, you know what? They need their father. They need their dad. And so, again, the work that you're doing, not only with Candles4Assange, but there's a couple other sites I just wanted to ask you about, just to ensure I saw them. They were posted. There's one out there for defend.wikileaks.org that also has some information. And then also the Don't Extradite Assange, which is really pressing to keep him from extradited to the United States. So all of those are things that individuals can actively get involved with. There's also a link, and I didn't put this one in the description of the video. I'll go back and put it in there along with some of the other sites. But there's and this was a great idea, is to actually put the direct how to get a hold of the White House, where people can call the main switchboards. They can email in, and this is a call to action. And I hope that everyone that's tuning in tonight really looks at this thing and really establishes that for the Republic of our country, for the United States, and not only for that, for the work that we do as journalists and having conversations and discussing things, that this is really an assault on free speech and journalism as well. That's how I look at it. And again, you can take to Twitter. I know that again that Trump follows Twitter. He's active on there, so you can tweet directly at him to free Assange. I think that if we all work together and we get that accomplished, hopefully we can cause some course of action. Then obviously thoughts and prayers with Christine and Julian. Any closing thoughts, Alex, before we wrap up this discussion?
Well, just that there are groups all over the world. When we did the Candles4Assange in 62 cities, that you can look back to those days and find groups in practically every continent, every city. There's a lot of people trying to work to do something, but we just need just more boots on the ground, more people willing to make the phone calls and emails to press their own MP It's an issue that covers every country, particularly Five Eyes countries and EU.
Yes.
And I know that there's a lot of moves in the EU Parliament that are trying to do something about it, but it doesn't seem like there's really much democracy going on in the EU or UK or USA right
Yeah.
now. And I would say the same about New Zealand. Unfortunately, Jacinda Ardern is on a different buzz here than I am, and a lot of people here are gushing about Jacinda, seeing her as the savior. But at the same time, we've got police can come into your house without an arrest warrant. We've got detention centers for people if they won't take tests. There's problems. There's incredible crackdown on free press. When Nikki Hager organised, that's the New Zealand investigative journalist, when he organised 1,400 names of people like John Pilger, Daniel Ellsberg, Chris Hedges, to sign a statement for Julian Assange, that should have been on the mainstream news. Not only that, in our 62 city protests starting from Wellington, and yet there was no coverage in New Zealand. So a lot of people see that we're in this beautiful, safe country that's green and all these things, and the truth, it couldn't be further from that. It's shocking. So I'm a bit ashamed of. I'm British. I'm from London originally, but I live in and I've lived in Australia, grown up in Australia, and I have an Australian passport and I have a New Zealand passport. I'm very lucky, but at the same time, I'm in the thick of globalist central here. And they don't care about truth. The Green Party here don't care about truth. The Labour Party don't care, and neither do the right-wing party. It's incredible.
That is.
And
that's
so,
insane.
and if you've got any third parties, just like in the USA, who tried to break out of that mold, they're demonized. In fact, the only party that was standing up really and being quite popular in New Zealand, the last elections, got removed from Facebook completely a few days before the election. That's a political party removed from Facebook, and they had way more people than Labour.
Yeah,
I mean, if that doesn't give you cold feet, what's going to? You're not going to vote for someone who's being removed.
Exactly.
Like it's hopeless.
It's very unfortunate, and these are times. And Alex, I'd love to have you back on again to talk about your activism, and I think we should do this again. What's the best way for our listeners to get a hold of you, Alex? Is it to go directly through the website and contact you through there? Okay, and
that comes to my email. I am Greenweaver Arch on Twitter, Candles4Assange, Free Assange New Zealand. I've got a few personas on Twitter. Candles4Assange is probably the best one for anything. If you're doing an action, and I will list it and get other people to promote it, just send me or reply to one of my threads and I'll add you on. So yeah, that's probably the best way. I am in Facebook, but to be honest, the amount of disinformation and brainwash people in there, I can barely bear to go into Facebook anymore. And so I've got a bunch of admins and mods all doing the candle stuff still, but I'm like, I just share stuff in there. I don't really go in there anymore. I've got my professor and a whole bunch of high school students who want blood.
Yeah.
So I don't want to go on there anymore.
Well, Alex, I want to thank you again for a terrific conversation tonight. And for those that are tuning in, thank you for being here. Please make sure to like, and then more importantly, share. Share this information, share this live stream in your networks, family, friends, et cetera, et cetera. So Alex, thank you so much. And let's do this again soon.
Please. Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Take care.
Thank you.